समय है विचारों का मैदान, बोल दिखाओ अपनी भाषा में, सब है तैयार। राइट और रॉन्ग में क्या डिफरेंस है, दे दो अपना ज्ञान। Let everyone around you know what it's time for. यही समय है, सही समय है, सही समय है।
Hello everyone, a heartfelt welcome to you all for being here today. We have gathered here together today for Viksit Bharat Ambassador Debates. A huge round of applause please. We are on path to Viksit Bharat and nothing can stop us from being a developed country. It is our mission to be a developed nation by 2047. The India of today has displayed robust economic performance and active action on various multilateral forums. India has a large and youthful population which is expected to be a significant demographic dividend in the 21st century. A sizable and a young workforce can contribute to the economic growth and innovation. India is also getting skill ready to be the world's future talent factory, as it is expected to have 20% of the globe's working population by 2047. India's century is a prediction and aspiration rather than a certainty. While India has tremendous potential, it also faces various challenges including poverty, inequality, infrastructure development, and geopolitical tensions. Some optimists are also seeing this as not only India's decade, but also India's century. However, some critics suggest that these trends are overhyped. Well, let us figure out if there is any merit to the above tagline. With that, we start today's debate on the topic, the only agenda for India right now is Viksit Bharat 2047. So for debate, we have two teams. Team A, which is for the motion, and Team B, which is against the motion. So in Team A, we have Atishwan Mehta, then we have Gaurav Saha, and Team B, we have Urvashi Balasubramaniam, and we have Rishabh Mitra. So starting from Team A.
Viksit Bharat 2047, Developed India 2047. Gandhi, Nehru and Ambedkar, three of our founding fathers and freedom fighters, they all had different visions of what development for India should look like. So when we talk about development, we must also consider what is development. Three international organizations, IMF, UNDP and the World Bank, all three have different definitions of what makes a developed country, right? So to talk about development according to whom and for whose benefit. Development in the current context we talk about isn't the vision shared by the incumbent government. It includes the following things but not limited to them. A $30 trillion economy and increasing the per capita GNI from the current $2,500 to $18,000 to $20,000. World-class infrastructure, becoming self-reliant in major sectors, fostering green growth and ensuring access to technological development and empowering our youth and civic participation. This model of development includes different facets of development such as economic prosperity, social advancement, environmental sustainability and effective governance. It is inclusive, it is sustainable, it is effective. Becoming a developed country will by itself not fix problems. However, what we are trying to say is that to become a developed country, we must fix our problems in the first place. So to fix today's problems, only we can become a developed country tomorrow. That means that for a long-term goal of becoming a developed country by 2047, we set short-term targets right now and that we match our words with tangible actions. Right now is the perfect timing for India to start becoming a developed country. It is at a critical juncture. There are many different things that make it a golden opportunity for encompassing long-term development today. The first is digital economy, as talked about by our chief guest. Next is that we have to escape the middle income trap. Also that we have a large opportunity to tap into the demographic dividend of India. It has a median age of 28 years right now, and it has the opportunity to have a higher proportion of working class people. And after COVID-19, a new world order has been shaping up, and we can make use of this opportunity where powerful economies are collapsing and the supply chains stand devastated. India is a complex and diverse country, and yes, there is no single one-size-fits-all formula for development. However, we believe that with effective policies, we can reach developed India status by 2047. Thank you.
Greetings to the House at large. Today I'm going to be proving the burden that Viksit Bharat is a misleadingly idealistic policy that promises a utopia without due considerations. We also throw a burden on side proposition. They have to prove that there's no other agenda of any importance for India until 2047. Our first constructive is the ambiguity of the definition. The policy is poorly defined and the lack of accessible breakdowns of the policy's intentions make it very hard for the public to critique it and makes it harder for us to hold the government accountable for it. Now, its elusive goals and focus on positive buzzwords make it easy to sell the idea and vision of an ideal utopian country. But when you dig deeper, achieving them outright is impractical because their nuance and complexity is not reflected in the policy. The biggest critique is there is an extreme lack of any tangible roadmap to reach any of these positive buzzwords in terms. And the trouble is that all these terms are abstract, unattainable concepts. So when you have a lack of a clear goal, that reduces the government's accountability. Now, historically, we've seen the evidence of when a short-term goal is introduced without a clear roadmap. We've seen India's renewable energy village electrification program, which had no maintenance helplines, and all the solar panels that were deployed in villages ended up stopped working in like 6 months. So when you have a lack of a clear roadmap, it's very difficult to hold the government accountable. We are proposing an alternative model. We propose flipping the switch, focusing not on potentially achievable, undefined targets, but existing problems. We suggest indices like the International Human Suffering Index, which provides indices for poverty, unemployment, and press freedoms, which may sound pessimistic, but this is the problem that India's population actually faces today. These are clearly measurable and they're therefore better for accountability. Now, moving on to constructive 2. The ineffective prioritization of indices. GDP, to begin with, is a flawed reflection of the country's success. Economic growth prioritizes monetary and quantitative growth over social and qualitative growth, and it doesn't differentiate between concentrated and distributed wealth, so per capita income doesn't actually solve that problem. Now, the excessive focus on GDP increase causes a certain self-colonization and exploitation of one's own resources in the name of growth in the foreign sector. It's a surface-level understanding of the ways it can be achieved, right? So indices clash and also contradict each other in 3 different examples I'm going to give you. The first is that this policy argues for more wealth and more industrialization, which famously widens the wealth gap and reduces the agricultural share, which causes more food security and poverty. So why the focus on industrialization in the first place, right? If side proposition brings up green GDP, it's important to know that the very fundamental concept of excessive economic growth is incompatible with the degrowth model in which humans coexist with natural habitats and preserve resources. And finally, westernization. This is a very Eurocentric model that Viksit Bharat is trying to propose, right? It doesn't actually consider Indian problems, it considers how we can get to a developed nation. And the next constructive will be handled by my next speaker. Thank you very much.
Honorable judges and esteemed members of the audience, I stand before you today making a case that while steering India towards the Viksit Bharat 2047 should undoubtedly be our foremost national priority, though not the only one. Firstly, Viksit Bharat is not just about higher GDP growth. It envisions high quality, universal healthcare and education, gender equality, sustainability, and next-gen infrastructure that uplifts citizen dignity and quality of life. Historically, nations have seen human development indicators improve exponentially. When it comes to per capita GDP hits a threshold, facilitating shift from basic struggles to investments in health, environment, etc. As China post 1979 or Singapore post 1965 show national income uplift precedes multidimensional progress. Targeted schemes have an important role but cannot wait indefinitely for funding. Rapid growth will create resources and intent for 10% year-on-year increases in social spending by 2030. Good governance and technology adoption will improve delivery at the same time. Job creation for India's young demographic bulge is also contingent on economic expansion, enabling Make in India and Digital India future readiness. This requires global competitiveness via export promotions, FDI inflows, skill development on a Singapore model. The virtuous cycle between skills, incomes, and jobs cannot start otherwise. Why do US have a metric where life expectancy is more and college enrollment is more for a youth? Because of its prosperity dividends. Such examples have to be taken into contingent. When we are talking about human security policies not being involved, we talk about how our finance minister has involved the nutrition security, Poshan 2.0, the universal health coverage, Ayushman Bharat, financial inclusion, Jan Dhan, skilling ecosystem with Make in India for Industry 4.0 era, and social security net expansion with Pradhan Mantri Jan Shram Yogi Mandhan pension scheme. How do we reach the place where we want to reach with a roadmap where we have certain prerogatives, which are for policy implications for India's Viksit Bharat 2047. We set benchmark and incentivize GDP growth rates against countries like China, firstly. Secondly, enabling infrastructure tax incentives to make India manufacturing competitive. Position India as a next global R&D and innovation hub by leveraging demographic dividend. Streamline governance processes with technology and make China's Shenzhen. Thank you.
Continuing forward with the points made by my previous speaker, I would also like to say that the Viksit Bharat proposes a very Eurocentric model of development that prioritizes materialism and industrialization and does not take into account a lot of the problems that come with that model. That is poor working conditions, increased urban poor, class inequality, and pollution. Furthermore, I would also like to talk about the poorly thought out methods of implementation with this plan at large. Furthermore, we will have to take loans from other countries, which might lead to a wave of neo-colonization and might lead to increased over-reliance and over-dependency on other countries. Furthermore, there was an idea portal that was created for Viksit Bharat, but this idea portal prioritizes people with access to the digital economy that are educated, politically aware, and upper class. Furthermore, when we look at wealth and happiness relationships, many developed nations have poor happiness markers, and driving India towards materialism fundamentally clashes with its cultural norms. And when we look at the youth saviors, there is an excessive focus on the youth as coming up with solutions to problems. But while it is great to have enthusiasm over social problems, it's important to recognize that these experiences come with more nuances. For instance, if the youth wants plastic bags to be banned, it needs to be recognized and emphasized that the issue is much more nuanced than that, since plastic needs to be used in a lot of industrial sectors. Furthermore, the side proposition has really focused towards a Eurocentric model of development, and the opposition would like to throw a burden on the proposition that they should try to prove that their Eurocentric model of development is the right way for India to move forward. We propose an alternative model, the International Human Suffering Index. This index considers Global Innovation Index, Rule of Law Index, Poverty Index, Corruption Perceptions Index, Gender Inequality Index, and World Press Freedom Index. And we believe it is a more comprehensive and holistic way to carry out both economic and social growth. Thank you. With that, I rest my case.
What the opposition calls idealistic, we call goal-oriented. We are not saying that there is no other agenda. However, what we are trying to say is that it is an overarching agenda under which all other agendas can fit. When they say that we have a lack of tangible roadmap, that is factually incorrect. We have a document outlined by the Government of India, Vision at 2047. We do not have undefined targets. What we are trying to aim for are macro-level growth with micro-level increase in welfare, with things that are clearly measurable. Right? India does not follow a Eurocentric model of development, nor are we aiming to follow it. We are aiming to map a development that is tailored to fit India, which means that no one is left behind, which includes inclusive growth, social protection, gender-responsive policies, and a push towards renewables. Right? So that I will show that historically not only has this roadmap been set, it has also been followed, and we can also follow it. If we talk about numbers, if we talk about facts, I will tell you facts. In the last decade, by the Multidimensional Poverty Index, more than 27 crore people have been lifted out of poverty. When we talk about literacy rate, according to the latest Mosby report, from 1951's 18.32%, currently the education literacy rate is 77.7%. Life expectancy has grown 20 years from birth just in the last 5 decades. According to the last Article 4 report of the International Monetary Fund, last year India contributed 16% to the international global growth. Right? It is the 5th largest economy. Even in HDI terms, yes, it lags behind. If you talk about human development, that is itself a Eurocentric model of comparison. If we see in absolute terms, it has grown from a 0.434 score to a 0.645 score before the COVID hit. So I would like to say that please make factual statements, and hence we support our development model. Thank you.
So the side proposition has failed to engage with several of our most important clashes. The first is that they have clearly misunderstood what we mean by a Eurocentric ideal of development. Because the thing is, in the very definition of the document that you claim is very clearly mapping out a roadmap, you have several contradictions that you haven't engaged with. You have environmental sustainability coexisting with excessive urbanization. You have industrialization, which increases general wealth but doesn't actually do anything to improve wealth inequality. And you are citing a lot of policy policies that weren't implemented under the umbrella of Viksit Bharat to support Viksit Bharat, which is essentially like fallacious. Okay, and because you haven't engaged with any of these contradictions, we can say that we won that side. And because you have misunderstood the idea of Eurocentrism, and even though you're defining all your metrics and indices in terms of Western ideas like economic development, you cannot claim that even though it's tailor-made to fit an Indian economy, that you're not borrowing ideas from a country that's not serving Indian ideals. And the success of we're not really depending the success and failure of policies. We're saying that when you have a very short time frame and a lack of a roadmap and a lack of clear definitions and many contradicting ideas that you're trying to map to, that you have a shifting of goalposts that happens very frequently, where you can report a success without any accountability for it, which you haven't engaged with at all. Now, yes, the economy has been experiencing growth, but 50% of the population owns about 3% of India's wealth. So you've done nothing to talk about wealth inequality, and we know as a fact that in economics, as you increase industrialization, as you move towards urbanization, even if you claim it's going to be sustainable in a very short time frame, we know that's going to do very little to help people in the agricultural industry who cannot just completely shift to the industrial sector, because that means we're going to have more food insecurity.
Your time is up.
Okay, and the rest I will cover by a second speaker. Thank you very much.
First of all, stop overly romanticizing welfare. No poor country has ever eradicated poverty without rapid growth. We must understand that schemes that we are deploying currently are under the umbrella where we are supporting the Viksit Bharat movement altogether. Because on the initial stages, as I mentioned, human security is our prerogative. Because when we move towards our economic progress, on multidimensional schemes, we address everything through energy, R&D, and as a global hub where we have innovation. Be it pollution, be it open defecation, or any problem that is associated to India, it can only be answered to when we have enough tools like energy and an R&D department which can suffice all our problems altogether. Coming to the facts that you are stating about indexes, if we just normally look towards the gender equality rankings in general, from 2021 we have jumped 20 spots, we have jumped 20 countries when we have a population of 1.4 billion. When we talk about the next inequality that exists in a developing countries undergoing structural transformation from agriculture to manufacturing and services, this brought nearly 300 million Indians out of absolute poverty by expanding the middle class. With rising foreign investments and progressive taxation and targeted welfare schemes, catalyzing by growth, relative inequality will also decline over long term as many countries like Malaysia or South Korea, as mentioned by Mr. Kant himself. As we move ahead, we see like foreign countries in general, when you are...
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is no debate till now at large because side proposition has failed to provide a model whatsoever, and both the speakers have contradicted one another. Let me explain how. The first speaker comes and says that they are not following a Eurocentric model, a burden that was thrown at them. First of all, they have failed to define development. They brought up organizations that define development and said that each of them define development in a different sense. But in the context of what they mean development specifically means for this context of the debate, they have failed to bring it up. Second of all, their second speaker brings up how rapid economic growth is the only way the country can grow. And that is a key and a salient feature of the Eurocentric model. Furthermore, the first speaker fails to bring up a different model of development, simply calling it a unique Indianized model of development, not really talking about what those effective policies are that the proposition plans to implement in order to ensure that that kind of development is carried out and that economic growth is ensured. So while we propose a model that has both economic and social growth, the proposition has failed to provide a model whatsoever because it has failed to define development, it has provided ambiguous definitions, and it is not sure if it wants India to move forward in a Eurocentric sense or if it wants India to move forward in an indigenous sense. Thank you. With that, I rest my case.
Thank you, both the teams, for putting forward your rebuttals and sir rebuttals. A huge round of applause for all the participants. With this, we move to the last round of today's debate. In this round, we'll be having a question-answer round with the judge, and the team would be giving the final concluding stance on the topic. Starting with Team A, question to Team A.
So I think all of you guys are doing a wonderful job at the debate. I mean, you're really making my job very difficult. But okay, let's now ask you guys some questions. And and on the arguments that have been made. So my first question goes to the team going for the motion. Either of you can take it and the other speaker can give the final concluding stance of the team. So the question is this: what are the three major things that you personally foresee as a team that can really derail this momentum that you're trying to build a case for India to become a developed nation by the year 2047? You want to take about 30 seconds to think about the question? Take 30 seconds.
All right. So to answer the three reasons so that our progress can be delayed. Firstly, we will point towards execution and operations as a key thing. As we have mentioned, that policy is the greatest mechanism through which we can reach Viksit Bharat 2047. So improved policies and labor laws being generalized at the same time, we have better taxation systems and less amount of competitiveness when it comes to foreign sector in the domestic market, so that our domestic market can grow overall. That would be one. Secondly, if we are, what can actually slow our progress would be a significant market collapse again, which is progressing, and if we are obstructed currently because of political instability that can happen, because what at the current moment we are seeing as perfect is the enemy of good at this point. We are trying to do something good, but everyone is coming with something dystopian and calling us dystopian, because we are trying to reach something that has been a prerogative for us since our independence, and it's been 75 years and we have not reached there, and we are prolonging it for another 75 years if we are stopping and we are not reaching the SDG goals at the same time, which is marked at 2030.
Thank you very much. If we could have the final concluding stance of the team, please.
I do not think that the audience and judge cannot separate the half-truths that the opposite bench is making when they say that our side has not provided this or not provided that. When they talk about a Eurocentric model, I fail to understand why is it exclusive from an India-centric model as well. Why can we not historically go back and see what good they have done and try to implement it in our model as well, without completely adapting all the ills they have done as well, right? So when we say that we do not have we are not adequately defining relevant, we clearly say that it is a vision shared currently by the incumbent government and all things encompassed within it, correct? So instead of maybe making fallacious claims, and when they give a counter proposal model, which also is very ambiguous, does not fail to serve that what we are trying to do is at least somewhat tangible, they do not say anything tangible compared to that. At least I believe that yes, our model, as my previous speaker said, might not be very perfect, but we are trying to do good, and yes, the net benefit overall should be there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we'll move to the team going against the motion. So first to the question. So if figures that we are reading about today, reported figures, quote, 4 crore plus homes have been made under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. 13 crore plus secure water tap connections have been provided under the Jal Jeevan Mission. Today we are talking about 11 crore plus toilets that have been made under the Swachh Bharat Mission. We have now moved towards a model where I think the chief guest was also talking about, which is about women-led development, right? So all of this somewhere clearly shows that the development model that the current government is promoting is a model which is highly inclusive and is about taking welfare to the last person standing in the line, or welfare to the last mile as it's known. So in the current context, don't you think that Viksit Bharat seems to be the only agenda for India at the current point of time, and it is actually a model that is very much inclusive? It is ensuring equity, which were some of the arguments that were raised by your team. So how would you respond to this, seeing the current direction that the government is taking at this point of time, because it shows a promise of inclusivity as well as equity?
However, we need to look at whether these policies have been implemented in an effective way, right? So you brought up the point about ensuring equity. According to Oxfam India's report of 2023, survival of the richest is India's story, with just 5% of Indians owning over 60% of the wealth, and the bottom 50% of the population owning just 3% of the wealth. Furthermore, while there has been a lot of budgetary allocation towards promoting economic, social, and infrastructural development, the execution of those specific plans and those policies have not been as strong. To take an example, last year there were huge issues with construction in infrastructure, specifically when it comes to transportation, which led to the Andhra Pradesh train collision, the Bihar train derailment, the Mathura EMU train derailment, and finally the Orissa train collision, which led to 300 people dying, and it was called the worst train crash of the century. And furthermore, when it comes to education as well, according to the budget that was released in 2024, there has been a funding cut by 61% of the UGC, and also there has been given more focus on research and innovation. However, if we do not improve the literacy rates of Indians, and if we do not encourage Indians to firstly come to colleges, which in and of itself can be very expensive for most of the Indian populace, then it only feels like it's once again an opportunity that's accessible to the elite portions of the society at large, right? So I think despite the fact that a lot of money has been put to the table, I think that the policies have not been implemented as fruitfully. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the final concluding stance of the team, please?
So the first big clash I've identified is that they claim that economic development has worked on previous policies, that the middle class has expanded, that we've seen so much success in previous policies. But this doesn't actually mention the implications of the current policy of Viksit Bharat, which is which they claim is going to handle everything from wealth inequality to urbanization to everything in between. But the World Inequality Report right now classifies India as an unequal elite country, which means that even though at a surface level it seems like our country is becoming richer and more prosperous, the average person is not actually seeing much of a change in their living, in their lifestyle, and their standard of living. They also claim that they also claim that because Viksit Bharat is comprehensive, there's no other agenda that we need. But this is also a contradiction, because your first speaker also mentioned that we do concede that there are other agendas, but this is an important one, which means you've conceded the debate to begin with. What we argue here is that because it's so comprehensive, because in a very short time frame you're allocating a scarce amount of resources and finances to so many different problems, it's not going to be implemented at a very efficient level. That means you're not going to be able to solve all these problems, which means you're going to have those shifting of the goalposts that we've experienced in the past, right? Also, you haven't engaged with our points on methodology. You haven't talked about how there's a youth savior complex, how there's a sort of like breakdown of the democratic system in which local representatives carry forward concerns and ideas. Instead, we are replacing with a digital sort of idea collection model, which I really hope doesn't become the norm. And you have basically conceded the motion. And you also bring up, on my Western model critique, you also say that you will develop based on renewables. But currently, India is building more and more coal plants. There's no transition that's occurring. And also, it's fallacious to say that it's easy for us to transition on renewables without giving any defense for it. Because last statement. Because developed countries developed on coal, and because renewable energy is extremely expensive, which means that India cannot afford it because the burden will fall to the lowest class. Thank you.
Well, thank you both the teams for participating and putting your best foot forward. A huge round of applause for both the teams, all 4 participants.
It was quite difficult for me to figure out that which is the side which is winning. It was really neck to neck and close. So from a very close, very, very close margin, we have the team that was going for the motion that has won the debate, Mr. Gaurav Saha and Stavan Mehta. Can we also invite the team going against the motion on stage, please? And a special mention to the second speaker, Mr. Rishabh Mitra. I think he was absolutely fantastic. And an honorable mention to him as a speaker.
I'm truly delighted to be in this wonderful campus here. Ashoka is a great pride of the country. It's a wonderful institution that has been built up. And every time I come here, I go back greatly inspired by the great work being done in this wonderful institution. It's always good to be in the midst of young students, because it inspires people like me when I interact with all of you. And I'm delighted that the subject of today's debate is Viksit Bharat, and many of you will examine this issue very closely. Let me just broadly put issues in a little bit of perspective. When India got colonized in 1700, India's share in global GDP was about 24%. By the time we became independent in 1947, our share had dwindled down to a mere 5%. And then in the post-independent era, the British Raj was really replaced by the license Raj, and we really throttled the dynamism and energy of the private sector by putting in a lot of licensing, controls, procedures, paperwork, rules, acts, procedures. All that continued till about 1991. And in the interim period, we had a growth of about roughly 3 to 3.5%. And one of our very distinguished economists then, who was heading the Delhi School of Economics, had termed our growth rate as the Hindu rate of growth and said that actually we cannot grow beyond this, which to my mind was an absolute fallacy, because in 1991, when we had reforms, it unleashed great amount of productive efficiency. We delicensed the industrial manufacturing process. We liberalized a lot in many areas, and efficiency grew, investment grew, private sector grew in that period. But after the 91, when Indian economy grew, we needed many more structural reforms, which were not carried out for a long period of time. And then between 2003 and 2008, as you see, when the global economy grew, India grew at a blistering pace. India grew between 2003 and 2008 at a blistering pace. But we should have used that period also to put in huge amount of good quality infrastructure. We could have used that period to do a lot of ease of doing business. We could have used that period to liberalize further in a vast range of areas. That opportunity was lost between 2003 and 2008. And then 2008, there was a global financial crisis. There was a major global financial crisis. And that led to the formation of G20 globally. And then, because of this global financial crisis, Government of India gave several financial packages, and this led to an inflationary trend in our economy. And instead of, again, carrying supply-side economics reforms, that is, again, focusing on structural reforms, we kept on giving financial packages. So 3 financial packages was given, and this led in 2011-12 to a huge ballooning of crisis. In 2011 end, we had a very severe dent in our economy, and this was, the economy came to a situation where there was inflation, there was slow growth, there were a range of crises. Foreign trade had slowed down, exports had slowed down, and so on. And therefore, by the time we ended around 2013, 2014, we had a scenario of slow growth, of high inflation, many scams, and also our inability to export our goods. And post-2014, when the new government came in, a series of reforms were initiated. The challenge before the government was to bring back macroeconomic fundamentals, ensure stability of growth, and bring in major reforms. And I think some of the major key structural reforms that were carried out was actually bringing in the goods and services tax, which is like bringing in one tax. It replaced 28 taxes and close to about 16 cesses into one single tax, which was paperless and cashless. And that means a tax like this across the entire European Union, one single tax was brought in. We also brought in a modern insolvency and bankruptcy code so that companies which are not able to repay are then able to go through a process of very fast bankruptcy proceedings, which has now got institutionalized. And then we brought in Real Estate Regulation Act, because a number of middle-class people had suffered. Builders were not able to complete their houses. They had taken money from middle class. Middle class had suffered across the country, and the Real Estate Regulation Act led to the cleaning up of the real estate sector. And I think the most important of all was that we brought down the corporate tax rate in India to global levels. Our tax rate, our corporate tax levels, we gave away 1,45,000 crores the government gave away, so that the private sector tax rates are kept at globally the best level. And much of the good balance sheet of the private sector, you see, is because of very low corporate taxes right now. So a series of reforms, structural reforms were brought in. But to my mind, the biggest reform that has been carried out has been the digitization of the Indian economy. So each one of us today in India, 1.4 billion people, have digital identity, which is the Aadhaar. Then between 2015 and 2017, India opened up 550 million bank accounts. That means 55% of the bank accounts were opened in India. Every second bank account was opened in India. And we embedded these bank accounts with both the digital identity of every Indian and the mobile number. And this led to what we now call the fast payments. So India today, each one of us, many of you would be using just your mobile to do the fast payments. For payment, for buying anything, pizza or anything that you buy, you use your mobile. That has been possible because of the 550 million bank accounts that we opened. During that period, Indian women, only 18% of the women had bank accounts. Today, close to about 88% of the women have bank accounts. But what has, as a consequence, happened is that India today does 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. We do about 126 billion fast payments last year we did. The second was China with just 28 billion fast payments. That was the difference. So we do about 46%. That's the difference. But as a consequence of this, many people like me, last 4.5 years, for instance, I have not been to a physical bank. I have not been to an ATM machine. I have not used my checkbook. I have just used my mobile. My mobile is my bank. And what has happened as a consequence of this, when I was a young officer, I just joined the service, I was working in the fisheries sector of Kerala, and my job was to transform the lives of traditional fishermen. I could give them new outboard motors so that they can go much further into the sea. I could give them new fishing nets. I could give them new fishing crafts, fiberglass crafts. But opening their bank account used to take us, know your customer, used to take 7 to 8 months. Today, we open a bank account based on biometric in less than a minute. So we've seen the transformational journey from about 8 months to less than a minute in opening of bank account. So from fast payments, what have we seen? We've seen the emergence of number of young startups. If you look at MobiKwik, if you look at Lending Cart, if you look at Pine Lab, what did they do? They cut away paperwork, physical work. They started looking at payment history and started doing credit. So a number of our young startups, which are all unicorn today, do credit on the basis of digital payment history. They just look at your digital history and give you credit. And then there were a number of young startups like Zerodha, Grow, Upstock, and these are all startups which we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years. Young startups, they took stock market, wealth creation to tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural areas, and therefore today they've made people in tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural areas access stock markets. And therefore, today they control about 35% of the stock market. These are all young startups, young people like all of you sitting here. And then we had another set of young startups like GoDigit and Acco, who provide insurance in less than a minute on your mobile. And therefore, the insurance market, which required a lot of paperwork, it used to take me 5 months, 6 months to get an insurance policy from LIC. You can get a car insurance, you can get any insurance on the go, on the mobile today. So what has India done is it enables fast payment in 30 seconds. It has enabled insurance policy in less than a minute. But one of the main things that happened as a consequence of all this was that the cost of acquisition of a customer had fallen very rapidly. And a company like Jio, Reliance Jio, which came in, could get 450 million customers in less than a year's time. 450 million customers in a year's time has not happened anywhere in the world. And that could happen because on the use of biometric, because you could establish digital identity of a person, they could get all their customers. And the cost of acquisition of a customer had fallen from $150 to less than $1 in India. That has been the big transformation. And that is why independent study by Bank of International Settlement, the Bank of International Settlement said what India has achieved in digitization in 9 years' time would have taken India 50 years to achieve. What India has achieved in 9 years would have taken India 50 years to achieve. And this is important because if you look at all the technological innovations that have happened in the world, in the last two decades, all innovations have come from big tech. They've come from Google, they've come from Amazon, they've come from Meta, they've come from Apple, and in the Chinese part of the world, they've come from Tencent and Alibaba. So big tech has used your data, my data, all to do more and more innovation based on data. What India did was something very different. India created the digital identity. It created the public interest layer. It's a public interest layer on top of which we've allowed private sector to compete. And PhonePe competes with Google Pay in India. And therefore, what we did was that on top of the public interest layer, private sector was competing and innovating. And our model was open source, it was open API, it was globally, totally interoperable. And because it was globally interoperable, you could take your UPI has gone to now about 15 countries, different countries of the world. You can do UPI from France, you can do UPI from Singapore. And we made a model which is enabled us to do innovation at population scale. We've been able to reach out to 1.4 billion people of India at very low cost. So population scale innovation at low cost has been the transformation. And the challenge is that what India has done in many of these areas like insurance, in fast payments, in wealth creation, if India has done the same thing in education through Diksha and Swayam, we've taken Diksha and Swayam to many other parts of the country. We've done this with DigiLocker. If India is able to find a solution for the 1.4 billion people of India, India will actually finding a solution for the 4 billion people of the world who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the next 2 to 2.5 decades. So the market is not just the 1.4 billion people of India, is the next 4.5 billion people who will be moving from poverty to middle class in the next 2.5 decades. That's the size of the market. So that's what we've done on structural reforms on digitization. The other big thing that's happened in India in the last few years has been how we've made growth with inclusiveness, growth with equity possible. And it's important to get a picture of the size and scale of what India has done. India has made 40 million houses. 40 million houses for its citizens. I mean, 40 million houses is like making a house for every single citizen of Australia. I mean, that means India has actually created in houses a complete Australia for its citizens. We've provided about 110 million toilets. 110 million toilets is like making a toilet for every single citizen of Germany. That's the size of the population of Germany. And we've provided piped water connection to 253 million Indians. 253 million Indians means that we've provided a piped water connection to every single citizen of Brazil. That's the size and scale of what we've done. We've also provided electricity connection to 30 million houses. That's Canada and Argentina together. You know, that's the size and scale of what India has done. But more important than that, we focused on infrastructure. We've built about 77,000 kilometers of roads. So 77,000 kilometers of road has a huge multiplier impact on our economy. And that's almost 2.5 times the entire diameter of the earth. That's what India has done in terms of infrastructure. So we've radically transformed the lives of citizens by providing housing, by providing toilets, by providing electricity connection, by providing piped water connection, and ensured that we are able to do growth with equity in this country. And that is very important, that whatever you look at Viksit Bharat, it must be inclusive growth. And whatever we do, we must be able to transform the lives of our citizens. And that is what we've enabled in the last few years to be able to do. Now, as we go ahead, the challenge is, what do we achieve by the time we become 100? And that's what you'll do, Viksit Bharat by 2047. And the challenge for India is that we are growing at 7.3%. The challenge is that we must be able to raise the per capita income of every Indian, and that means we must be able to grow at even higher rates. And higher rates means that if you look at the history of the world in the past, when Japan was growing post-World War II, it could grow at 9%. You look at the history of Korea. Korea has grown for 2 decades at 9% plus. In recent times, China has grown at about 10% plus. So the challenge for India is to accelerate the pace of growth and grow at 10%, 9 to 10% for a 3-decade period to make itself by the time we'll become the third. We are the fastest growing large economy in the world. Fastest growing large economy in the world. We are the 5th largest economy. By 2027, we'll be the 3rd largest economy. But the challenge for us is to be a $35 trillion economy by 2047. By 2047, we must be a $35 trillion economy so that we raise the per capita income of our citizens. And there is a difference between growing at 6%, there's a difference at growing at 8%, there's a difference in growing at 10%. The compounding power of growth is very powerful. And if you grow at higher rates, your per capita income of every citizen rises. So if you do a modeling and see what happens at 6%, what happens at 8%, what happens at 9%, what happens at 10%, many of you will realize that the significance of higher growth changes the quality of life of every citizen. And to be able to do that, to be able to grow that at 10%, India needs constant innovation. India needs constant disruption. And it's people like you, all of you young people, who will innovate, who will bring disruption, and that is what India is doing in many areas. So what has India done? India has opened up new areas of growth. India has totally liberalized its space economy. India has totally liberalized its geospatial economy. India has totally liberalized its drone economy. All these are sectors where all of you young people have an opportunity to make India grow. And all these are going to be the emerging areas of growth. And that's why we keep emphasizing, the Prime Minister keeps emphasizing that growth will come if India works in all the sunrise areas of growth. And the sunrise areas of growth are areas, many of which will be related to climate action. Because while we've not contributed to occupying the carbon space in the world, our carbon utilization is still very low at 1.96 metric ton, which is about close to just about 3% of the total carbon space. Whereas as a country, we are given a population which should be entitled to about 17.5% of the carbon space. But irrespective of that, the Prime Minister has taken the challenge that India will be the first country in the world to industrialize, to become a manufacturing nation through a process of decarbonization. And therefore, we've done 185 gigawatt of renewables. We are using solar energy to crack water to produce green hydrogen. Today, we import about 180 billion worth of fossil fuel. What the Prime Minister said is that by the time we become 100 in 2047, we should be an exporter of energy instead of being an importer of energy. This means that we should be a champion of green hydrogen. We should use green hydrogen in steel, in cement, in refinery. But to become a champion in green hydrogen, we should be able to manufacture. India is climatically blessed, and therefore we should produce lots of renewables to crack water, use electrolyzer. And therefore we should, by 2047, become a global champion of climate action. We should be an exporter of energy. We should be the cheapest exporter of energy. We should be the cheapest producer of energy, of clean energy. We should be the biggest manufacturer of electrolyzer. These are completely new areas of growth. For us to be a Viksit Bharat, you'll have to disrupt, you'll have to innovate, you'll have to do a huge amount of fresh thinking, and most critically, be top class in execution. What has been demonstrated is that India is capable of top class execution in housing, in toilets, in piped water supply, in solar energy, all these areas, and now in mobile manufacturing. In all these areas, India has demonstrated its great ability to transform the lives of Indian citizens. So ladies and gentlemen, Viksit Bharat, while I've told you what has happened, there are many, many challenges also for the next few years as we move forward to be a Viksit Bharat. And the challenge will be that, we've largely grown on the back of services sector. We need to grow on the back of manufacturing. How do we make India a manufacturing nation? How do we urbanize? Because urbanization will be a very critical driver of growth. How do we do sustainable urbanization? When you drive down from Delhi to Rajasthan, you will see a lot of unsustainable urbanization. How do we do transportation? How do we do urbanization on the back of public transportation? And therefore, how do we get into when Europe was urbanizing, America was urbanizing, they did urbanization on the back of cars. They have 1,100 cars per 1,000 people. Europe has 900 cars per 1,000 people. We have only 21 cars per 1,000 people. So we can technologically leapfrog into a completely new process. Our level of destruction will be very low. And therefore, urbanization, what kind of urbanization do we want? And thirdly, to my mind, how do we improve, which is very important, how do we improve learning outcomes, health outcomes, how do we improve nutritional standards? All these are critical challenges. The new educational policy talks about many of these things which has been spelled out. The health mission talks about many of these things. We are today providing insurance to 500 million Indians, 500 million Indians, which is totally cashless, paperless. We've opened up close to about almost 1,000 new primary health and wellness centers, which integrates yoga with health. And therefore, these will be the many new challenges which we'd like you to debate and discuss on how to accelerate the process of rapid growth of 9 to 10% with financial acquisition, with financial inclusion and equity as India marches forward. So I look forward to this very interesting debate. I look forward to a lot of energy, vibrancy, and dynamism from all the young debaters on how do they foresee India as a driver of growth, not merely in India, but how do we transform the model of what India is doing and take it to other parts of the world. But one critical thing which is very important is when India grows, it must be an exporting nation. It'll be very difficult for India to grow without becoming globally competitive and making India export to other parts of the world as we are doing in many other things. And therefore, I look forward to hearing some of these very interesting facets of your perspective on taking India forward during the Viksit Bharat period and making India a champion of many areas, not merely services, but manufacturing, urbanization, enhancing our agriculture productivity, and more critically, making India a champion in education, health, and nutrition, which is all very critical. Thank you very much. With these few words, I'll conclude. I look forward to a very interesting debate and discussion. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. I am Harsh. I'm a second-year student at Ashoka. I'm pursuing a degree in political science and IR. So my question to you is that as you rightly mentioned in your address that India should like currently focus upon like a lot upon manufacturing per se. So how can India sort of further utilize the success of the production-linked incentive scheme and with regard to the China Plus One strategy to enhance its Make in India like campaign, as again the global attention is shifting a lot towards alternative manufacturing destinations. So what steps we can undertake to maximize the potential impact of Make in India particularly?
So firstly, I think a lot of work has been done on ease of doing business by this government. We were ranked 142nd earlier. We've scrapped about 1,500 laws. We've scrapped a lot of rules, regulation, procedures, and acts. A lot of this now has to shift to the states. And in the next 5 to 6 years, actually states need to become very competitive. Secondly, we need to create a sense of competition among states. We need to name and shame them. We need to rank them like we started doing on ease of doing business. Huge amount of competition will spur change. Actually, we need to produce all these states as champions. So if you look at the manufacturing, Gujarat has done well, Maharashtra has done well, Tamil Nadu has done well. We need the mineral-rich states of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa now to become the champions of manufacturing. And if they become because they're really mineral rich, if they become the champions of manufacturing, they'll grow at about 10% plus for next 3 decades, and India will grow. It's very important now that the movement for growth comes now from the states, and particularly the states in the eastern part of India. That's number one. Number two, to my mind, it's very important to understand that the manufacturing, it will get more and more digital. It'll be totally digital. The startup movement has shown that we need to actually change the curriculum of our educational system in many of our triple IITs, IITs. Today our startup movement, we started the startup movement in 2016. There were just 350 startups. Today we have 110,000 startups. We have over 115 unicorns in India. But there is a very big shortage of developers, product developers. There's a shortage of 1 million product developers for startups. Now the world will be defined by machine learning, artificial intelligence. There's completely new category of prompt engineers now. So we need to have data scientists, we need artificial engineers, we need machine learners, we need a completely new set of skills for tomorrow's world. And that is where the curriculum content must change in many of these areas. Manufacturing will be totally digitized. It will be very personalized. Every single individual will get the product that he demands. And therefore, digitization will be the key to India's growth story in the years to come.
Hello, sir. I'm Tejas. I'm a first-year student at Ashoka. Currently pursuing computer science. I wanted to ask a question on the lack of an overarching policy vision document in India. A lot of the countries, especially a lot of the G7 and G20 countries, produce a national defense, a national foreign policy, and I'm not sure, but I think even a national economic policy strategy. What we have is a state where on every single law that we seek to pass or every single policy decision that we seek to bring, we have a lot of different policy committees, we have a lot of different reports, but we don't have an overarching vision for that. So it's kind of like all over the place. What are your thoughts on that?
No, NITI AaYOG had come out with a plan for 7 years, for 3 years and for 7 years. That's available on the net. But now, new plan for Viksit Bharat, what India should do for 2047. The Prime Minister has already announced will be unveiled very shortly. The Prime Minister has highlighted that actually in one of his interactions, and I think work on that is already going on across sectors. So you'll have a vision, a clear vision and an action plan for 2047.
सही समय है